You are standing inside a dark, cool, abandoned hallway of a 3-story apartment building in the heart of Portland, Oregon. Outside the thin window panes, a damp, endless, rainy evening of June 20th, 1979 reigns. The heavy air, filled with pre-night moisture, brings a faint aroma of wet asphalt, old exhaust fumes, and fresh summer greenery from the bustling streets. But here, behind the double-locked door of apartment number 12, a completely different, sinister, frozen, almost otherworldly atmosphere instantly covers your skin in goosebumps. On the living room floor, right in the middle of frantically scattered belongings, torn papers, and overturned magazines, lies the motionless body of a young 20-year-old girl. This is Anna Marie Hlavka. Her blossoming, promising life was brutally cut short just a few hours ago with unspeakable, calculated, cold-blooded cruelty. The police, who will arrive at this location 40 minutes after a frantic, hysterical call from her sister, will document a crime scene of perfect, almost impossible cleanliness for an amateur. No distinct foreign fingerprints on the furniture, no signs of forced entry on the metal door locks, not a single piece of physical evidence that could somehow point to the presence of an outsider within these walls. The killer seemed to dissolve into the thick darkness of the Pacific Northwest, leaving the city's top detectives alone with a silent, unsolvable puzzle that would consume years of their lives. Today, we know completely, down to the microscopic details, exactly what happened in that closed room. And we clearly know the name of the man who brought this bloody horror into the student's cozy apartment. But the finale of this decades-old case conceals a shocking, unprecedented, horrifying paradox that makes even the most experienced criminal analysts shudder. When forensic science of the future finally pierced the wall of the unknown 40 years later and named the exact identity of the ruthless executioner, detectives realized with silent astonishment that searching for him, putting heavy steel handcuffs on him, or sending him to the courtroom made absolutely no sense. The state had already carried out its highest form of punishment and executed this man by lethal injection back in October 1999 in the distant, bleak dungeons of Texas for a completely different, incredibly brutal, and high-profile crime. The monster had dined at the same table with justice for years. He received his final verdict from a human court, but the secret of Oregon remained securely buried in his unmarked grave for more than 2 decades after his own heart stopped beating forever from the effects of chemical drugs. This tangled situation presents each of us with a deep, sharp, incredibly heavy moral dilemma that forces us to think seriously about the very essence and imperfection of human justice. If the law enforcement system destroys a dangerous killer for one specific crime but leaves his other, no less terrible atrocities without a punitive verdict, while other victims remain mere numbers in cold archives for 40 years, can this be considered a complete triumph of justice? Is it a tragic, cynical helplessness of the state machine, which relievedly closes its eyes to old folders as soon as the executioner vanishes from the face of the earth, depriving relatives of the right to a full trial? Leave your candid, honest comment at the very beginning of this video. Write what you think about this unique and terrifying paradox of justice. While you share your thoughts in the comments, we will unfold the yellowed, fragile pages of the Oregon dossier to understand step by step exactly how the media creativity of detectives and the molecular technologies of the future forced a man who had long since turned to dust in an underground grave to speak. Her name was Anna Marie Hlavka. Her short life lasted only 20 years, and she was the very girl who embodied the purest, brightest teenage dreams, hopes, and aspirations of the young American generation of the late 70s. She was short in stature, with beautiful brown hair that always fell in soft waves over her fragile shoulders, and striking, clear, large eyes that looked at this complex world with absolute, boundless, almost childlike trust. Anna moved to the big city of Portland from a small provincial town to pursue higher education. She sincerely dreamed of dedicating her future to social work for the poor, psychological support, or professional journalism. She would sit for hours over heavy textbooks in the city library, loved classical literature, and every night kept a delicate personal diary where she recorded her most intimate thoughts about love, the future, and her own fears. On that ordinary summer day, she had returned from another exam, planned to cook a delicious dinner for her sister, and was smilingly awaiting the arrival of close relatives with whom they were going to spend the weekend in nature. On the floor by her bed, right in the thick shadow under the wooden leg of the nightstand, forensic scientists would later find one small household item. It was a small, elegant silver bracelet with a thin green emerald charm in the shape of a four-leaf clover, which Anna never took off in her life, considering it her main family talisman for luck and protection against evil. During the fierce attack and unequal physical struggle, the bracelet was brutally torn from her thin wrist and rolled unnoticed into the deepest corner of the room. Remember this detail now. We will definitely return to it decades later, when this very modest, forgotten piece of darkened metal and the invisible microparticles of human tissue, preserved in its microscopic crevices, will become the key to unlocking a secret that for 40 years seemed forever buried in the graveyard of history. A detailed examination of the body's discovery site in 1979 showed that before her death, Anna Marie Hlavka was subjected to brutal, prolonged sexual assault and abuse, after which the attacker cold-bloodedly strangled her with a thin electrical cord from her own desk lamp. The perpetrator acted with extreme calculation, calmness, and professionalism. He left no obvious biological traces, in the sense understood by forensic scientists of that era, completely avoided leaving fingerprints on the smooth surfaces of furniture and dishes, and most terrifyingly, meticulously restored relative order to the scattered things in the room, intentionally trying to delay the moment her relatives would discover the body. He simply locked the door, took the keys with him, and calmly walked away, blending in among thousands of passers-by. Portland's leading detectives launched a massive investigation, checked every student on the university campus, interviewed hundreds of residents across the street, checked drivers of random vehicles, and the girl's former acquaintances. However, not a single multi-hour interrogation yielded a real result. The investigation hit a blank, silent wall of institutional helplessness and limitation. Since forensics at the time lacked computer databases, had no electronic tracking, and could only rely on direct eyewitness testimony, which this nighttime drama simply did not have. Then everything fell apart. The Portland police fell into a classic, tragic trap of a false victory, when, a few months after the start of the investigation, under fierce pressure from the press and management, they detained a local man named William. This man had previously had minor brushes with the law, suffered from mild mental disorders, and due to intense stress, could not clearly and confidently recall his alibi for the night of June 20th. He was subjected to harsh, grueling, hours-long psychological pressure in the dark offices of the police station, forcing him to confess to something he did not commit. Local newspapers of the time rushed to run front-page headlines announcing the successful arrest of the dangerous Oregon strangler, and the frightened public finally felt a long-awaited but completely false sense of relief. But during a detailed, meticulous check of medical facts and a laboratory analysis of blood type, it turned out that William had not and could not have had anything to do with the attack on the girl, and his confused testimony was merely the result of wild terror and intellectual vulnerability before the system. The police had to release him with shame and public apologies, after which the man left the city forever, and the investigation found itself back at the starting point, but now without any new leads, ideas, or financial resources. The case of Anna Marie Hlavka gradually turned into a depressing, cold, dust-covered archive file that languished for decades in the secure shadows of the Portland Police Department basements. It lived in the body, like a splinter that could not be removed. This terrible, unspeakable, daily pain completely destroyed the lives of her sister and close relatives, who could find no peace, falling asleep every night with the same horrifying thought. They clearly understood that the killer of their beloved Anna continued to breathe calmly, walk the same earth, buy groceries, smile at people, and perhaps was already looking for or had found a new defenseless victim, remaining absolutely invisible to the law. Generations of detectives succeeded one another. The folder of materials was passed from hand to hand like a heavy, cursed inheritance of the past. But each new investigator merely shrugged helplessly, looking at the yellowed, brittle pages of 40-year-old reports where there was not a single live lead. Every case on this channel is weeks of digging into real archives, forensic analysis, studying thousands of pages of protocols, and searching for hidden connections that others simply do not notice. Find 10 seconds right now, leave a like, and subscribe. This is what keeps cases like this from staying cold. Your activity, every comment and like, is the only real force that helps us continue our work. Open the closed doors of criminal repositories and make the law work, even when the system tries to hide the truth from society. Decades passed before the truth surfaced, and the situation drastically shifted direction only at the end of the 2010s, when technologies for working with degraded, old DNA samples made a colossal, almost fantastic leap forward. A special team of Portland cold case detectives decided to return to the origins of this nightmare and retrieved Anna's silver bracelet and carefully preserved clothing swabs from the evidence storage. But science had its own take on this case. Advanced private forensic laboratories, using the method of ultra-sensitive molecular analysis, were able to isolate a full, clean, undamaged profile of male DNA from microscopic dry traces 40 years old, which undoubtedly belonged to the real killer. However, the initial upload of this profile into the National Law Enforcement Database, CODIS, yielded absolutely no results. The criminal seemed to have never existed in modern electronic registries of detained individuals, indicating that he either never fell into the hands of police again, or his data was entered into computers in a completely different way. Then, laboratory analysts took an extremely bold, innovative, and creative step, applying the method of forensic genetic genealogy, which at that time was just beginning to revolutionize forensics. They uploaded the resulting molecular code into large civilian databases where millions of ordinary people voluntarily searched for their distant ancestors, relatives, and built their own family trees. Step by step, using complex computer algorithms and analyzing overlapping chromosome fragments of third and fourth cousins, researchers began to construct a massive genealogical tree of the unknown author of the Oregon crime. Along this difficult path, a real tense logistical micro-thriller unfolded that nearly buried the entire investigation. The fact is that the main private server center where the archival data of one of the key genealogical branches of this family was stored was physically located in another state, which at that exact moment found itself in the epicenter of a catastrophic winter blizzard and ice storm. Technological chaos on the roads, massive power outages in the region, and the real threat of hard drive damage due to sharp voltage drops in the network nearly destroyed the results of months of scientific work. Systems engineers and technical specialists of the laboratory were forced in manual mode, making their way through dark corridors with flashlights to reroute massive flows of information to backup cloud media just minutes before the main servers completely shut down, miraculously saving the final proof from irreversible disappearance. When the computer systems finally completed the lengthy data processing and narrowed the search to one specific small branch, the electronic card of a man named Jerry Walter McFadden appeared on the computer screens of Portland detectives. But when surprised Portland operatives tried to immediately locate his current residence, check tax returns, or issue a search warrant to make an arrest, they discovered a shocking, incredible truth that completely turned their understanding of this case upside down. Knowing and proving are two completely different things, but in this specific case, there was no longer any need to bring the matter to a lengthy trial. Jerry Walter McFadden no longer existed among the living on this planet. The state had already fulfilled its highest mission of justice. This man was officially executed in the state of Texas by lethal injection for another brutal mass crime committed by him in the mid-80s. The parallel timeline of this man's life evokes a deep, almost physical feeling of ethical disgust, rage, and anxiety in any sane person. Immediately after he ruthlessly took the life of 20-year-old Anna Marie Hlavka in her Portland apartment in June 1979, McFadden left the borders of the state of Oregon calmly and without any haste. He traveled freely around the country for years, changed jobs, bought new cars, easily struck up friendly acquaintances with women, grew flowers near his temporary rented homes, and felt like an absolutely elusive, unpunished genius of the criminal world who managed to outsmart the law. Finally, he moved to Texas, where his hidden maniacal, beastly instincts flared up with new, even more destructive force. In 1986, he brutally kidnapped, raped, and murdered a young girl, and also ruthlessly killed her friends who tried to resist. Texas justice, unlike Oregon's, acted as quickly, harshly, and uncompromisingly as possible. He was arrested within a few days, sentenced to death, and after 13 years of grueling legal appeals, they administered a lethal injection to him in October 1999. Throughout this entire lengthy stay on Texas death row, McFadden never once, by a single word or hint, mentioned what had happened in Portland 40 years ago. He took the secret with him underground, sincerely believing that his first Oregon sin would forever remain unknown to all of humanity. The question mark never completely disappeared. It was simply declared closed. In 2019, the Portland District Attorney's Office, along with police leadership, gathered a large official press conference where, in front of dozens of television cameras, they demonstrated irrefutable scientific DNA match charts that 100% linked the Texas maniac executed 20 years ago to the murder of Anna Marie Hlavka. This was the moment of full, ruthless, final ripping of all masks from the faceless ghost of the past. If we were to attempt a detailed deconstruction of his obituary today, or the image that his few defense attorneys tried to artificially create during the hearings in Texas, we would see absurd attempts to justify his cruelty by a difficult childhood, psychological disorders, or an accidental combination of circumstances. However, dry, precise molecular facts completely shatter this public respect, pity, or doubt. Science has clearly proven that McFadden was a systemic, calculated, ruthless nocturnal predator who deliberately traveled to different corners of the country, leaving behind a bloody trail of ruined girls' destinies, and cynically took advantage of the imperfections of police systems in different states to avoid just responsibility for years. Today, Anna Marie Hlavka would have turned 67 years old. She should have walked a beautiful, long, rich life path, raised her own children, seen their high school graduations and weddings, held her small newborn grandchildren in her arms, and met a peaceful, happy old age surrounded by a large, loving family on a cozy porch under the quiet Oregon sun. She could have written dozens of beautiful books, saved many people through her social work, and gifted her boundless warmth to everyone who was near her throughout her life. Instead, her figure forever remained a tiny, frozen, silent dot in the cold, rainy night darkness of 1979. A 20-year-old girl on the living room floor whose right to a future was cynically, ruthlessly trampled by a man who believed he could outsmart time and human memory with impunity. This unique, paradoxical, terrifying story has become a fundamental and historical lesson for our entire modern society, clearly proving that no amount of time, no thousands of miles of distance, and not even death itself is capable of protecting a killer from the inevitability of full exposure when the past begins to speak in the uncompromising, precise language of modern molecular technologies. Justice may move very slowly. It may wander in the dark for 40 years due to human incompetence, laziness, or the limitations of tools of a specific era. But it always finds the right path to the name of the guilty, tearing off all masks even decades after his physical disappearance from this world. Take care of your loved ones. Be attentive to every detail around you. And always remember, no case remains cold forever if we continue to stubbornly fight for the truth and the bright memory of those who can no longer speak for themselves before this vast world. We will see you in the next case.